I am Diana and I'm a storyteller, and I've got some great tales for you today on Tuck Shop Tales. But I hope you're all sitting comfortably. I'm very happy here. I've been out in the garden this morning and 2 of my stories have got gardens in them. So there you go. So it's the start of the holidays and well, you're a bit through now. So I'm sure you've had plenty opportunities maybe to get in your own gardens, or we're starting to get a bit more active now and getting a bit more freedom, parks and things. And I've chosen a variety of stories today so that hopefully it'll cover a variety of likes, and it'll also cover a variety of ages. So I'll start shortly, but I'm just going to let you get yourself settled because it's not quite 11 o'clock yet. And as you can see, you've got a slide in my hair, but the reason for that is to keep it back a bit, because nobody's been able to go to hairdressers just now, have they? There's been so many things that we haven't been able to do, but we're gradually getting there. So I'm very much looking forward to telling you these tales today, and it would be great to have any feedback online at the Scottish Storytelling Centre or through Once Upon a Tune. So get yourselves organised with your drink or your biscuit or whatever, and there will be some opportunity to join in. So what will happen is I'll do the activity first, and the next time that I do it you'll know what to do. So that just makes it quite simple, and that'll be great fun, because I think when you're joining in with stories you get a bit more out of it. And I hope you'll get a lot out of today. And then, of course, at the end of that, you'll be able to go and do whatever you want. I've just been in my garden just now, and it's a great place to be. So maybe I'll start with my first story. Now, my first story is all about a little old man and a little old woman. And they lived in a cottage, and they were very happy. And this cottage was on the outskirts of a little village. Well, they had a big garden. Now you might think because they were old that really they wouldn't want a big garden, but not a bit of it. These people loved their garden. They were always planting things. They had neatly mown grass. They had lots of flowers with lots of beautiful colours. They had bushes and a cherry tree, an apple tree, and right at the back they had a vegetable patch, and they were always trying out new vegetables. Well, they decided that they would grow something different this year. They tried beetroots and cabbage and carrots, but they decided instead, no, they would try some turnips, or as we say in Scotland, neeps. So they sowed them, they sowed the seed, and then they had to wait, and then they had to wait, and then they still had to wait, and even after that they had to still wait. But eventually some shoots popped out, and they could see, or they could know, that underneath the ground the turnips or the neeps were probably getting bigger. And when they looked more closely at the patch, they realised that one of the turnips was showing at the top, a bit like the top of an iceberg, because most of it was still underground. And it was purple and white. And they thought, wow, this looks like a big turnip, a big neep. I mean, it wasn't just big, it was very big. It was huge, or so they thought, but they hadn't actually got it out of the ground yet. But if that was the top part, then it was bound to be huge. So they were quite excited, and the old man said he would pull it out. And he got hold of the top of the neep, and he held on to the shoots, and he, are you ready, pulled! And he pulled, and he pulled. And when it was all done, well, the turnip, the neep had not moved a slight bit. So the little old woman said, maybe you need some help. So she would hold on to the little old man. But just before she did, she said, why don't you go to the garage and see if we've got a rope, and then all the bit of the turnip that you can see, you can put the rope around and tie it securely, and that'll make it easier. So that's what he did. He went to the garage, he got the rope, and he tied it securely to the top of the turnip, which made it easier then for them to pull. So they pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled, and they both fell over. But you know, nothing happened. The turnip, the neep, was still in the ground. Oh my goodness. Well, meanwhile, the dog and the cat had been watching, and they thought, well, we could help. So that's what they did. They got on behind the little old lady. So there was a cat, and then the dog, and then the little old lady and little old man with the rope. And they, are you ready, guys? They pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled. But even after all that pulling, they didn't manage to get the turnip out of the ground. It was still there. Oh my goodness. Well, just at that moment, there was a sound. Are you ready to make the sound? Now, that was the grandchildren coming over. A little boy and a little girl. And they said, Granny, Grandad, we'd like to help. We'd like to help. So they got on behind the cat, and behind the dog, behind the little old lady, and behind the little old man, and they all pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled. But do you know, when they looked down at the turnip, it was still stuck in the ground. Now meanwhile, at the edge of the garden, there was there was a little mouse, and the little mouse was wondering if he could help. He was just a tiny little mouse. He was squeaking away, and he thought, maybe I'm too little, maybe I'm too little to help. But he so wanted to help. And the little grandson saw the little mouse, and he said, oh, come here. And he patted his pocket, and the little mouse went over, and he went into the grandson's pocket. And then, are you ready, guys? They pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled, and they pulled. And you know what? It just made that bit of a difference, that extra tiny little bit of help. And they managed to get the turnip quite a way out. And one more gigantic pull. Are you ready? Heave ho! And it was all out. And they all cheered. Hooray! And well, the little old man and the little old woman started to lift the turnip. And the grandchildren helped. And they took it inside, and it got all washed. And then it got cut up, and it got made into turnip broth. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Turnip stew? Yeah, great, yeah. Or maybe even turnip scones or turnip muffins. Because they had so much turnip, they wanted to try out all these different ways of having it. So that's what they did. They even made neeps and tatties ready for when they would have haggis next. Well, they had such a great time after all that, and they were very pleased that they had managed to have such a huge turnip. So they had a bit of a turnip party, and they made shapes with some of the pieces of turnip that were left over. They cut out shapes, dipped them in the paint, and made pictures, and they had a lovely time. And then someone decided to write it all down in a book, and that's how I found out about it. so that I could tell you today. Right, that was The Enormous Turnip. Now the next story that I'm going to tell you is set in Greece, and I don't know if any of you have ever been to Greece, but it's a great place. It's very warm, it's a good place to go on holiday, there's lots to see, there's lots to do. But this story is set a long time ago, when people believed in the gods in the heavens and the people down on earth. But sometimes the gods would come down onto the earth, and that's what happened this day. Hermes the messenger was the god, and on his shoulder he had a great big box, and on the great big box there was golden threads keeping it securely tied. And as he was walking down the street, everybody was looking at him, everybody was thinking the same thing. What a wonderful box, what an intriguing box, what a mysterious box maybe. Everybody was wondering what was in it. There were squiggles and symbols on the side. And it really was quite amazing. Now Hermes was walking down the street with this box perched, and he saw Pandora. Pandora was in her garden in the front with Epimetheus, her husband. I think we'll call him Epi for short. So Pandora and Epi were in the front garden, and they were just enjoying the sunshine, doing a little bit of weeding. And at that time the world was a whole lot simpler, a whole lot more straightforward. Now, Hermes the messenger decided that he wanted to leave this chest, and he had some other errands to do. He would collect it on the way back. So Pandora and Epi said, sure, they would look after it. But Hermes said, whatever happens, do not open this box. And he was very definite about that. Well, does that not make you more curious? Does that not make you more ready to try and find out what is inside? I mean, why could he not just have told them? But he didn't. Maybe because he was a god. Well, he went off, and this box is in the lounge. And Pandora and Epi were in the garden, and they were just enjoying themselves with the neighbours, having some soft drinks and some food. Now, Pandora was a bit restless. After a wee while, she thought she heard things. I mean, there was a general hubbub in the garden. There was birds singing, there were people chattering, there were crickets and grasshoppers. So maybe she just misheard. So she joined in the company, but she still kept one ear listening for those noises again, in case it was something that was inside or that she hadn't heard before. So there she was, and after a while she did. She was sure there was something, but she couldn't quite make it out. So she made her excuses and went into the house and looked in the kitchen, but there was nothing there. And looked in the bedroom, but there was nothing there. And then she looked in the lounge where the box was in the corner. The beautiful box with the beautiful carvings, with the golden thread all tied round. And she thought she heard something coming from there. She wasn't sure, but there was a sort of and there was a, let me out, help. And she was totally surprised. What could this be? And of course she knew that she must not open the box. So she became more curious, and she just hung about for a bit and waited to see if there were any more noises, and there were. But she tried hard to be not tempted, and she went and sat in the kitchen just to make sure that she wasn't imagining all this. And then she came back because she heard them a bit more loudly. Let me out, help. And she went over and she got hold of the threads, and she felt them, the golden threads, and she looked at the squiggles, the symbols on the outside of the chest. And she was tempted. She was sorely tempted. And then she just had to open it. So she undid the golden threads, and the noises started to get a bit louder. Let me out, let me out, let me out. And then the deed was done. The box was opened. And out they came, creepy crawlies of every size and shape. There were wasps, there were flies, there were tsetse flies, there were tarantulas, there were lizards, there were serpents. There were lots of things. And none of them were acting nicely at all. They were all stinging or biting, and Pandora got marks all over her arms. She opened the window and she screamed, "Ah!" And her husband came. Her husband came, and he couldn't believe what happened. There was Pandora with the box and with all the creepy crawlies going out the window. But Pandora was upset and she started to cry. And so Eppie went over and gave her a hug. And then they both sat in the quiet after that. And Pandora was having a hard time believing what she had done. So Pandora then thought that she heard something else coming from the box, a sort of fluttering noise against the wood. Can you do that? And she looked at her husband and he said, "Well, you can't do any more harm, can you?" So she opened the box and out came a butterfly. A beautiful butterfly. After all the creepy crawlies with the stings and the bites, came a beautiful butterfly. And they say that butterflies are connected with hope. And they're so lovely to look at as well. So at least at the end of it all, there was a happy ending. And that was the story of Pandora's box. Maybe you've heard that term. I remembered it when I was a little girl. Right, I've got another story for you today. And it is about a little tailor. Now this little tailor lived in a village, and what he did was lots of sewing, obviously, because that was his job. And he had an old-fashioned machine, but he didn't really use that a lot. He preferred to do things by hand, and this story was set a long time ago. Now he was very good at making things, and when he went about the village, he was always looking super smart. He had trousers that were so neatly sewn, and all the seams were perfectly straight, and beautiful colours, beautiful design. It was wonderful. So he was very proud of his business, and he was a kind of cheeky little chap as well, you know. Well, this day he was having his lunch, and what he loved to have for his lunch, I don't know if you like this, but he liked bread and jam. And he'd make it into a sandwich, and his favourite jam was strawberry jam. And today he'd made a great big sandwich with lots of jam oozing out. And he's just looking forward to this. Well, he had his window open since it was such a nice day. And of course, if you have your window open, all kinds of things crawl in. Well, there were bees, there were wasps, but they went off. And only the flies stayed. And he got fed up. He got fed up of all these flies buzzing around because they liked the jam. So he was going, are you ready? Shoo, 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 shoo. But you know what? It didn't make the slightest bit of difference. No. So off he went to have his sandwich again, or to finish more of it, and he decided he would try something else. And over in the corner there was a broom. So he lifted it up, and the next opportunity he got, are you ready guys? Whack! And there, on the end of his broom, were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 at one blow, 7 flies. And well, he was very proud of himself and very happy that he'd managed to do that. And he finished his lunch, and because he was feeling very happy with himself, he decided he would make a belt. Now this is another belt that he has made, but the one that he made this particular day was black in the background like this, and had lots of golden threads, just like this one. But the golden threads said something. They said 5 plus 2, they say 7, 7 at one blow, and that was across the belt. So when he went out for a walk after that and he was wearing the belt, people would look at him and think, oh, he must be very strong, he must be very brave, he must be very clever to outwit and manage to get 7 people at one blow and slay them, knock them all down. Well, they didn't know it was just flies that he killed. No, they thought maybe he'd managed to knock out 7 dragons, all in one blow, and he was just a tiny little tailor. He wasn't very big. So then, after that, he decided he would go for a walk. And word spread about how wonderful this little tailor was, how clever and how strong and how able he was. And word got to the king, who lived in a castle on the top of the hill a bit further on. And Little Tailor was out for a walk one day, and what should happen but one of the king's servants noticed him and said, "Oh, come and see the king, he's been talking about you. He's heard all about you." So the little tailor went, and he thought maybe the king wanted somebody to do lots of stitching, lots of, making lots of fine clothes. But no, he had heard all about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at one blow, and he had a problem that he wanted the little tailor to fix if he possibly could. So what he did was sat him down, gave him some drink, and said, "There are 2 mighty giants in my kingdom, and they keep causing a terrible rumpus. They fight each other, and even when they're playing, they make such a noise on the ground, it seems like there's an earthquake trembling underneath the castle, and people have stopped going out for walks round about because of these giants. So what I would like you to do is to go and deal with them." Now the little tailor thought, if you go and do something for the king, there's always a bargain. So what he was going to do was he would speak to the king and find out what he could have in return. Now, as far as he knew, what people normally asked for was half a kingdom. So that's what he asked for. And the king said, "Okay, you will need to be well rewarded." And then he said, "I would like the princess's hand in marriage." And the king said, "Okay." So off the little tailor went. And he was walking for quite a bit, but then he was aroused because he heard some noises. Can you do that? The 2 giants were lying under a tree, and they were fast asleep. And that was a bit of good luck, because 2 sleeping giants were better to deal with than 2 wide-awake giants. Now, he had to decide what his plan was going to be, so he went round quietly, round behind the tree, sat on the stone and thought about it. And after a while he bent down and picked up some pebbles and put them in his pocket. And then he went over to the tree and he quietly climbed up so that he was overlooking the giants down below. And he stayed there, and after a while he threw a pebble down. Yeah! Right smack on his forehead. So one of the giants woke up and he was very angry. Who's waking me up? And of course it was the little tailor. But he didn't think to look up. He just looked over at his brother and thought, must have been my brother and he's gone back to sleep. But he was tired, so he went back to sleep again. And then, after that, he, the little tailor that is, was still sitting there and he still had some more pebbles in his pocket. So the next time, after a while, he threw it down and he got it to go on the same giant's head. Plop! And this time, this giant was not going to accept that. So he got up and he went over to his brother and he started punching him. So the other brother woke up and had to start defending himself. And before you could say anything, they were having a huge fight. And they knocked each other out. So the little tailor's job was done. And he was walking back to the castle and thinking all the time while he was walking. Well, when he got to the castle, he saw the king, and the king was very happy. And of course there was the bargain. Now, the little tailor had a question for the king. He said, I know that we agreed that I would have half your kingdom, but I've just been thinking about that. And if I have the kingdom, I have to run it, and I have to do lots of jobs. And really, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to be overlooking a kingdom. I want to be sewing. So I was thinking, could we possibly change it so that instead of half your kingdom, I get to be your tailor and make wonderfully fine clothes for all your household, and then everybody will find out about it, and that will be great. It will make us proud of all the fine clothes. Well, the king smiled and he said, yes, okay. And he said also, I know I asked for the princess's hand in marriage, but I've been thinking about that, and I'm just a young chap, and really I would like to be friends with the princess, but you know, I don't want to get married just yet. So how about if the princess and I just become friends? And the king smiled again. Now he smiled because he knew that the princess was quite a strident young lady, and she wouldn't want to know or to be told what to do. So that was fine, and he didn't want to give away half his kingdom in the first place. So he was more than happy to please the tailor. And the tailor went on sewing and went on sewing, and everybody knew if it was an outfit that the little tailor had made, because it was so wonderful. Everything was neat and tidy, the colours were great, the design. He was a very clever little tailor. And that is the end of that story. Right, I'm just looking at the time. I've got a very short one that I can finish off with. But great listening, and I look forward to seeing your comments on that later. But anyway, I'll tell you quickly about this one. This is about a king. Now this king had a wonderful garden with grapevines and flowers and trees, and he loved to walk in it. He felt at peace when he was walking in his garden. So that's what he did. And one day he was out, and there was somebody asleep on a bench in the garden, and he thought, that's strange. Well, it wasn't actually a somebody, it was a satyr. Now a satyr is half man, half goat. So half man down to here, except he had horns, and then goat, and goat's hooves at the bottom. And King Midas knew that this satyr was a good friend of one of the gods, Dionysus. So he kindly offered to take him back, because what had happened is this satyr had lost his way. And he was able, King Midas was, to take him back to Dionysus. And when he got there, Dionysus said, I'm so grateful, I would like to grant you a wish. Are you ready? A wish. So he went to Dionysus and he thought and thought and thought what he could have as this wish. Well, the thing was, the king liked to be in the treasury all the time, where all the gold coins were, and where all he kept his jewellery, anything precious. And there were lots of gold things in there. But the thing about the king is he always wanted more. Now, the king also had lots of servants and advisors, so he didn't really have to do an awful lot of thinking. And if someone offers you a wish, then you should really think carefully before you tell them what you want. Well, anyway, King Midas, he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and he thought, all the same thoughts, all about more gold, and being more powerful, and more rich. Wow, wouldn't that be great? Yes, he thought. Now, when he told Dionysus, Dionysus said, are you sure? Are you sure that's what you want for your wish? Well, he said it was. Now, Dionysus knew he was wise, but he thought maybe King Midas had to find out for himself. Because sure enough, King Midas, as he walked away, had the golden touch, touch, touch. So whatever he touched turned to gold. He touched a flower, and because it was so heavy then, it turned to gold, and because it was so heavy then, it fell over. It didn't have its scent, it didn't blow in the wind. The grass turned golden, the bushes, the pathway up to the castle he touched, and it became golden. He was getting quite carried away, but he was very happy about this golden touch, touch, touch. Anyway, King Midas went into his room. Now, it was still quite early in the day, and he hadn't had his breakfast, and he was still a bit tired. So what he did was pluff up his pillow. But as soon as he pluffed up his pillow, it turned to solid gold, and he banged his head on the way down. And then he went to lift some grapes, and he just remembered before he put them in his mouth that if he did, they would shatter his teeth because they had turned to gold. And just at that moment, his daughter came in, his beautiful daughter, and she was running to her dad because she'd heard the noise of him putting his head back. And he knew what was going to happen now, but he couldn't stop it. She turned to gold. She turned to gold. And she was a statue. She was a golden statue. Oh dear, what was he going to do? He was so heartbroken. He couldn't eat with his hands. The only way he could eat was with a fork and a knife. Anyway, he was extremely sad, and he realised that this was not a happy thing to have as a wish. It was a curse. It was the golden curse. And so, after some time, he went back to Dionysus, much as he didn't want to go, because kings don't always like admitting when they've got something wrong, when they've done something foolish. But King Midas realised that he had to do something, and Dionysus was the only person that could help him. And what Dionysus said was, wash your hands, wash your body in the river Pactolus, and when you have finished doing that, you will be cured. You won't have the golden touch. not even of a little bit of a golden touch. So, at the end of it all, his daughter was his daughter. The flowers were the flowers, and they had a smell, and they waved in the wind. And King Midas learned a lot from Dionysus that time. So if you ever get the chance to make a wish, think carefully first. Well, that's all the stories I've got for today. I hope you've enjoyed them, and it's certainly been great being on Tuck Shop Tales. So thanks very much for listening today. Bye.